I've been muted this entire time. My bad, y'all. This is NTX Radio. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and this is another episode of Bitches Love Sports. My apologies. I'm just trying to get these notifications out to my subscribers to make sure that they know to come join us because there are a lot of things that we want to talk about today. And so I just want to make sure that we have some people in the chat to have these conversations. We've got some new headlines coming out regarding Brian Schottenheimer and some things that he has said to the media about the team and their season. And we've also got some headlines regarding the FIFA World Cup. So just give me 1 second. And as you're filing in, don't forget to hit the like button and go ahead and drop any thoughts, any questions you might have about the Dallas Cowboys or any Dallas sports team in the chat, and we'll get to those today. The one that we have the most updates about is the Cowboys, despite the fact that, as we all know, they are missing the playoffs. But there's still been a lot of conversations regarding what might happen next year regarding personnel, coaching, the Pro Bowl voting that came out today, and who made the Pro Bowl. And if you've been following my channel, then you know I did an interview yesterday with Ken Rogers of NFL Films, and we talked about what's coming up tonight on Hard Knocks and also just his insider perspective on the Dallas Cowboys and what he thinks they have in store for them going forward. So definitely some good conversations to have there. Just give me a few minutes, bear with me so I can make sure and get these notifications out. Um, hey JV, good to see you in the chat. On up. JV, do me a favor though. Type a question in the chat so that I can talk to you while I'm sending out these notifications. Uh, I was just telling I was just talking about the interview that I did with Ken Rogers yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. Let me know if you saw it and let me know if you have any thoughts on that. JV said Jerry Jones' new interview with 105 The Fan proves that Eberflus will coach out his contract. Okay, what did he say? I did not catch it. I have been working all day except for when I came over here. And so I caught Brian Schottenheimer's interview today. And I heard what they asked him about Matt Eberflus, but I did not catch Jerry Jones's comments. So let me know. And I'm going to tweet out this link while you're typing that in. It's crazy that a team that's not even going to the playoffs has this many headlines at this point in the season. It's bananas, but that's the Dallas Cowboys for you. Thanks. I'm glad you liked the interview. Just sending out that we're live and post. All right. So got a few notifications out. Hopefully some people will join us in the chat. Um, okay, so JV, the reason why I'm asking about that, and I guess this is also the reason why I didn't look too much into the new sound bites from Jerry Jones was because I from the last things that I had heard from Jerry Jones, it sounded like he was actually considering not bringing back Matt Eberflus. The comment that he made after the game about how he's got a target on him and the last 3 games would determine a lot about his future, um, made me think, well, okay, maybe he realizes that this isn't a good situation. So you're saying that he's not holding Eberflus accountable and he believes it's the players. All right, I'm definitely gonna have to go and listen to this interview and see exactly what the quote was. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna Google it during the break just to see if anybody wrote it, and we can do that for the read and react. Because I'm gonna say this regarding the players, and I'm saying I know I talk about being a former coach. I was never an NFL coach. I did coach men, but the NFL, I'm sure, is a different animal than MRDA or USAR's roller derby, right? But this, I'm saying this just as a coach, as someone who's been in leadership positions, as someone who's played team sports, as someone who studies sports psychology. I don't think the blame can ever be 100% on the players. It just can't. I feel like if if it's 1 or 2 players and they're just being ornery, they're just being stubborn, then you can maybe blame them for not showing up the way that they should, not practicing the way that they should. But if you have an entire defensive unit that is checked out, if you have a unit full of guys who just won't give it their all, at some point you have to be like, why can't the coaches get the best out of these guys? because that doesn't make sense for an entire unit to be that way. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, unless he can point to specific players and say that they have some sort of, uh, I don't know, some sort of agenda. And even there's even if they did have an agenda to get Eberflus out of there, even if the like most of the defense came together and was like, we got to get Eberflus out of here. So make sure that you're not giving it 100%. I feel like as GM, as president, as owner, you would have to ask yourself, why would they do that? Why would they do that? What about this guy would make these guys who play for their pride, who play for their jobs, who play for the chance to win, to go to the playoffs, to hopefully win the Super Bowl? Like a lot of these guys have been literally training their entire lives for the opportunity to play at the highest level, to perform at the highest level. Why in the hell would they sabotage their reputations? Would they sabotage their own results because they don't like a guy? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Nothing about blaming the players 100% makes sense in this situation. It just doesn't. And so that's why the more I think about what players do and the role that they play in this situation, whether it's from a mental standpoint or a physical standpoint, nothing about blaming the players and not blaming the coach makes sense. At some point, if you actually follow any any discussion that starts with the players, if you actually follow it to its logical conclusion, has to come back around to, all right, what's the deal with the coach? Whether it's chemistry, whether it's his philosophy, whether it's what he brings to the table in terms of culture. One of the things that I actually wanted to ask Ken Rogers about that we didn't get to, I wanted to ask him, why haven't we heard more from Matt Eberflus in Hard Knocks? And I know we have several episodes to go, but we've heard from everybody. We didn't seen Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones. We saw Brian Schottenheimer. We even heard from Aaron Whitecotton. We saw him talking to the players. You know, uh, we've seen more of Jameis Winston when talking about the Cowboys than we've seen of Matt Eberflus. So I'm just like, what is the deal with this guy? I don't know. You just can't convince me. Anyway, now that those notifications are out, thank you, JV, for giving me some topics I could rant about. Let's get into what we have planned for the show today. So, um, if you saw in the thumbnail, the quote that I put in there was just like, where Schottenheimer said in today's press conference, we just love to play. I normally don't get to those press conferences before I show up here, but I got here early today. Um, and so the idea of we just love to play seems to be echoed among a lot of the players. However, it seems to be something that different players, they seem to have different interpretations of what that means to them. Not wildly different. And the main reason that I'm pointing that out is because even though the interpretations are different, I feel like if you were to, you can't really assign a numerical value to these statements, right? But if you were to average them, I think what we're hearing a lot from the locker room when we listen to these interviews and these sound bites, what we're hearing is players who one are trying to give themselves a reason. You can tell because for a lot of these guys, yes, it is about the playoffs. Yes, it is about getting to the Super Bowl. And once they don't have those chances, they kind of have to like trick themselves into still being motivated. So one, they're giving themselves a reason to play, or two, they know that they're not really at the top of the list when it comes to their position, and so they are trying to take the last two games to play for their pride and for their reputation. So we'll get to that in a second. Real quick though, a couple of shout outs and call outs. One, and this is completely unrelated to the Dallas Cowboys, but I have to shout her out. Venus Williams got married, y'all. I don't know when it was. It sounds like it was a private ceremony until she's announced that she is married. They didn't announce that the wedding was coming up, but she has married an Italian actor and model named Andrea Preti. So Venus Williams is 45. Mr. Preti is Italian and he's 37 or 38. Google doesn't even know exactly how old he is, but I say that to say if you are, what they consider getting up there in age, because for some reason there's still the expectation to get married in your 20s. But if you're in your 30s, late 30s, early 40s, don't give up. There could be somebody out there for you. It could be somebody that you haven't met yet. Could just be that it's not your time yet. So shout out to Venus Williams for biding her time, getting married at 45. And those pictures are beautiful, y'all. Her and Venus and Serena just look like princesses in those pictures. So shout out to Venus. Um, Cowboys Pro Bowl. So Pro Bowl players were announced this morning. This year, only 5 players made it, which I didn't check, but I feel like that is the lowest number of Cowboys to make the Pro Bowl in a while. I feel like in the past they've had more than anybody, or they were like tied, maybe second place, but it's usually like 7 or 8. This year they only had 5. Now maybe had they won more games, they'd have more people in the Pro Bowl, but that's just not how the chips fell. So the players that made the Pro Bowl are Dak Prescott, George Pickens, Tyler Smith, Brandon Aubrey, and surprisingly Cavante Turpin. And I say surprisingly because like I literally published an article this morning related to one of the sound bites that we're going to listen to, and one of the points I made in the article was that fans are kind of down on Cavante Turpin, not only because his performance has dropped off from years past, but also because his performance this season is actually below the league average. JV, what are you asking about? 2024 and 2020. Are you talking about those years in terms of how many people made the Pro Bowl? I don't remember what the numbers were. Um, but yeah, Cavante Turpin's performance this year is actually below the league average. So it's a little bit surprising to me that he made the Pro Bowl, but I mean, shout out to him. I'm not a hater, so hey, congratulations to him. But there are some people who are confused, and I just want to say, don't let these Pro Bowl results gaslight you. Cavante Turpin, his production is a little bit lower. Now, some people might look at the special teams unit as a whole and say it's not his fault. It's the unit as a whole. But I would point to some of his slip ups, drops, some of those ridiculous penalties that really didn't make sense, and say like, nah, a lot of it is him too. But shout out to him for making the Pro Bowl. Congratulations. Uh, CG is in the chat and says, hello, hello, good luck, and have fun on your podcast. I know you're based around Texas, but hey, college football is happening, and I think that's cool. Yes, it is cool. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that next week. I have some guests coming in over the next few weeks. We're going to have some really fun conversations surrounding some things besides the Dallas Cowboys. But thanks for joining us in the chat, CG. And I appreciate the well wishes for today's show. But with those Pro Bowl selections, I want to talk about two things. One, there's been a little bit of a conversation around how CeeDee Lamb may or may not feel about not making the Pro Bowl this year. And some people are like, well, he got hurt and he missed 4 games. And if it weren't for that, he would have made the Pro Bowl. And it's funny to me how short some people's memories are, because I'm like, do y'all not remember the fact that he had a real problem with dropped passes earlier in the season? I feel like that had a bigger impact on him not being selected in those 4 missed games. And it could be either one, but I just felt the need to put that out there because there's so many conversations that I've been hearing about, George Pickens and his impact and why CeeDee Lamb didn't make the Pro Bowl. And I'm just like, yo, did y'all forget that whole chapter of this season where CD kind of seemed like he reverted back to his rookie year in terms of drops? That was a thing. That was a thing. And it's an unfortunate thing because when we consider his entire body of work and what we feel like he's capable of, does it seem like he deserved it? Yeah. But I can kind of understand why he didn't, or why he didn't. So anyway, that being said, let's get back into these sound bites. So, two of the sound bites I want to play for y'all are related to another article I wrote this morning for Cowboys Wire. And it has to do with something Dak Prescott said about the youth of the offense. So I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to let y'all hear the sound bite and I'm going to let y'all know my thoughts on it.
News. Tyler Smith was saying he feels like against especially the playoff teams, the good teams you guys have played, that at a certain point in the game the attention to detail lacks, and then it kind of just flips. And he mentioned the fourth down; it just was a couple details that you guys didn't execute on. How do you feel that's? Do you agree with that? And I guess how do you feel that kind of can be addressed either now or in the future in the offseason?
I don't know if I feel the same just yet. Got to watch the film. When you present that question, I guess I think about the 3-game winning streak of playing against some good teams, and when it got tougher, guys were actually producing more and making the plays in those games, actually on the tougher side of the game rather than in the beginning. So hard to say that exactly, but I know as a leader of this team, especially as the offense, it will be addressed at some point or another, whether it's now or whether it's at the end of it. But I think maybe youth has a good reasoning for that, if that is the case. And guys will understand as they get older, right? Sometimes the guys put a lot on themselves, and hell, I did it when I was young, right? You put more pressure on yourself than ever is called for, rather than just going and executing and doing what you've done your whole life and what you've been coached to do. And so some of that comes with great leadership. Fixing that comes with great leadership, and then the other part comes with just experience, understanding that you've made it harder on yourself in those moments. And so how can you fix that communication as well? And so that'll be something I'm sure Shotty, myself, and all of us, that'll be talked about at the end of these 2 weeks more than tomorrow.
All righty. So he says maybe it's youth, and that'll be talked about at the end of these 2 weeks more than tomorrow. So here's what I found interesting about that. One, both Dak and Shotty have talked about addressing a lot of things at the end of the season. And I feel like that's happening partially because they've kind of shifted gears. As much as they say they're still playing to win, and I believe that they are, and these games are important, and I do believe that they are, some of the bigger projects that need to be addressed, they are saving for the end of the season. And I think if they were actually headed towards the playoffs, there would be a bigger sense of urgency. So I just feel like, to me, and this is just my interpretation, I feel like that's a sign that although they are playing to win, they are playing for their pride and reputation, in some ways the mentality has shifted in the sense that there are some things that they feel like can wait. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're addressing something like the youth of a unit. I don't know how many people realize this, but the Dallas Cowboys starting offensive line was literally the youngest starting offensive line in the league, in the entire league coming into the season. And even with TJ Bass coming into the rotation, with Tyler Guyton still being out, TJ Bass is only 26 years old. So it's still a very young unit based on average age. Terrence Steele is the oldest at 28, which is very young for an offensive line, for like everybody on the offensive line to be that young. But what I also thought was interesting was the fact that this media member presented the question as saying, yeah, Tyler Smith said that, there's a lack of attention to detail. And I want to applaud that for not overreacting to that, because when I heard it, it almost sounded like that media member was trying to say that Tyler Smith was talking bad about the offense and saying that, they're just not doing what they should do in terms of attention to detail. But I want to play for y'all what Tyler Smith actually said, because I feel like what he said is a little bit different than how it was presented. And I also feel like he made some very valid points.
Out and weren't able to get our momentum back. But I think it's been the same story this year. Like you get into these situations where it's 4th and 1 and you need a yard to keep the drive going. Those are big plays. I feel like those are championship plays that really are going to continue to define us. So it's just about dominating those situations and putting ourselves in the best position to succeed, because, you can watch the tape every week. We can compete with anybody. It's just that situational football we got to get better at.
How do you change that? How do you get in your play?
It's attention to detail. It's late in the season. Everybody knows we're eliminated, but we can still build. You can still build on things for next season. You can still build on things as a player. Ultimately, every day we get to come.
All right. So he said he was talking about situational football, and then he mentioned, when he was pressed on that, that's when he mentioned attention to detail. So my interpretation of his statement was that it's not that attention to detail is the main problem. It's that they have some things to resolve in terms of understanding situational football and really dialing it up a few notches when the game is really on the line. And I think that's something that you have to learn from experience. I think I've said to y'all in the past that when it comes to being an athlete and performing at a higher and higher level, sometimes you don't realize how much you have to step your game up until you step your game up as much as you think you can, and it's not enough. And then you push even further, and maybe that's still not enough, and you push even further. Not everybody is actually able to hit 100% on their first try, because a lot of times in our minds, what 100% is we interpret 100% as some degree more than the effort that we've already put in. And so a lot of times it takes a little bit of a push, which is where coaching comes in every aspect. I have a personal trainer that, like, when I'm doing my sessions with him, he'll push me way harder than I push myself, because I push myself as much as I think I can push myself. And he'll look at things like my bar path, my bar speed, my form, things like that, and be like, no, you can go heavier. You can do another rep. And then I do it and I'm like, damn, that shit was hard. But he was right though. And so, yeah, sometimes it just takes a few attempts. It takes a few tries. It takes a little bit of time and experience to actually get to that point where you're understanding situational football, where you're actually giving it 100% in the ways that you know you can. And JV, regarding your statement about starting some of these other guys, I think most people agree with you. What Schottenheimer has been saying in his press conferences is that because it's a short week and because there's a short turnaround, that there's not as much time as he'd like to get these guys in the rotation. So he was asked directly about Maffa and somebody else. I don't remember. But I know he was asked directly about Maffa. And his answer basically alluded to, if it was a longer week, we might be able to see more in practice to feel comfortable putting him in. So for the last game of the season, we might see some of these guys. But for this Thursday, I would not bank on seeing these guys. Or if you see them, I wouldn't bank on seeing them much, unless they just show up to practice and go Super Saiyan and they're like, oh, we got to put him in. But it doesn't sound like that's really a priority for this week. And Dak apparently said that he would literally fight for the opportunity to play in these last 2 weeks. And I know we don't want him to get hurt. We don't want him to get hurt. But like I said, I mean, being afraid of him getting hurt in these last 2 games, I mean, you might as well be afraid of him getting hurt at training camp or getting hurt in first game of the season. Like, any player at any time can suffer an injury that can cause them to miss some part of 2026. Them last 2 games of this season does not guarantee that they'll be healthy for all. So if they want to fight for the right to play, I support that. My main thing is kind of what you're saying here, JV, with this list of names, is that there are guys that need to be evaluated. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made in terms of what this team is going to look like for next year. So, yeah, I would really like these guys to be evaluated. But, hey, these coaches, they see them at practice, so all we can do is hope that they're getting all the information that they need and hope for the best. I'm not going to get too emotional about it. I'm not going to fight over it. But yeah, just know that I agree with you, but I can also see the other side too. And that's kind of where I am with it. I want to play one more soundbite for you guys before we get to the break, just because I think it's kind of funny. And this was a soundbite from Trayvon Diggs. Because yesterday, actually, what I had intended to do was my top sound bites from over the weekend. But then I got that Ken Rogers interview and I had to edit it and put it out, and that took a lot of time. But anyway, let me play this sound bite because I think it's telling in several ways.
Of course.
What happened with the Latin McConkey touchdown?
The cover 2?
Yeah.
Cover 2.
Okay,
It's cover 2. Cover 2.
just nobody did. So
Cover
they pick it
2.
up.
Cover 2. Cover 2. Cover 2.
What's the one? Okay, so here's why that soundbite is telling for multiple reasons. We only have 30 seconds to break, so we're definitely going to talk about this when we come back from break. And then we've got a couple of things in regards to read and react that we're going to talk about when it comes to FIFA. So go ahead and put your questions. If you have any predictions about why I found that clip amusing, you can put those in the chat. Also, go ahead and put your questions about that soundbite in the chat, and we'll address them when I come back from break. Stay tuned. This is Bitches Love Sports on Intake Radio. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and we'll be right back.
Have Have you ever met a single person in your life that enjoys paying taxes? No, no one does. If you can't sleep at night because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
What's up, North Texas? Welcome back to Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet. And right before the break, we discussed a soundbite from one Trayvon Diggs, where he was asked about the McClunky touchdown in the game against the Chargers. And his response to the question of what happened there was cover two. And they said, what about the cover two? He said, cover two. Cover two, cover two. And that was his only answer. So here's why I find that interesting. Earlier in the season, there was some controversy related to Trayvon Diggs and some critical remarks of the defense. Him saying that the defense had no identity. It basically felt like he was trying to find a classy way of saying that Eberflus can't coach and the group is suffering because of it. And there was a lot of controversy around that. A lot of people felt that he was wrong for that or out of line. And so, I feel like he was trying not to get in the same type of hot water that he got in for saying that in the first place. But two, it's obvious that he still feels that that the scheme is the issue. Because otherwise, why would he simply say cover two and nothing else? So I don't think that Trayvon Diggs' feelings have changed, because some people have questioned that with him saying he wants to be a Cowboy and him being seemingly talking to the media again. There has been speculation about whether or not his feelings might have changed, whether or not he's bought into the culture, bought into the scheme, so on and so forth. To me, that answer says no. And he said, no, his feelings have not changed in the most respectful way that he could. And he smiled through it. And I think he handled that interview very well, considering a lot of the personal questions that they were asking. But yeah, so, I mean, with the cover two anyway, there are a lot of areas that can be exploited, right? That's why sometimes when defenses do employ a cover two, like there's the coverage, there's your formation, and then there's what's actually executed. So a lot of times a cover two will be, I don't know if disguise is the right word. I'm still trying to figure out the right terminology for all the things that I see on the field. But basically, like, they'll have a cover two, but then they'll have plans to adjust or alter the cover two based on what the offense does. Basically to make it harder to not exploit all the weaknesses of the cover two. And if you've listened to a lot of people's criticism of the Cowboys defense, it just seems like those alterations in order to stop those holes from being exploited aren't really happening. And And that's not just me saying that. Like, literally, even before seeing Eberflus's defense, when I had a friend who was trying to teach me about the cover two, they were teaching me about, like, why it can be exploited in certain ways, like why there are usually holes in the middle, like why it's so easy to attack deep down the sideline when a defense is using, like, a pure cover two, why Tampa 2 is no longer as effective as it was, and why even that is usually like a disguise, or something else. So this isn't like me saying like, oh, Eberflus's cover two sucks. Most people know that the cover two is easy to exploit. As JV is saying in the chat, yes, it's easy to out scheme cover two. So usually there's something that goes along with it, where the cover two, like, players rotate down into something else, or some kind of way to stop themselves from being exploited. Even going back to like last year when people were criticizing Mike McCarthy for like the vertical routes that he would do all the time. Vertical routes are a common way that coaches at a very basic level will try to exploit the cover too. But that's why a lot of coaches don't do the vertical routes, because it's like the same way people know that cover two can be exploited, people know that those vertical routes can be out schemed as well. And so if you're playing chess, not checkers, when it comes to football, neither of those things are usually a good idea. Oh, I got a super chat. Thanks, Mr. Marcus Goffs. I'm going to put you up on the screen for a while. I still don't have a protocol for Super Chat, so I apologize, but I will say thank you. And I will work on coming up with a protocol for people like you who are supporting the show. But Mr. Marcus Goffs says, if the boys are going to fire Eberflus, please, God, you have to keep Diggs. Don't punish a player for a bad scheme. Marcus, thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what I meant when I put in the chat over the break that I think they're going to have to choose between the players and Flus, because I don't think Diggs is the only one. I think Diggs is the most outspoken one. Diggs is the one most likely to wear his heart on his sleeve, not in an emotional way, but in a I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm not about to fake my feelings kind of way. So even when he tries to be polite and cordial and smile through it, you can still kind of get a hint of how he feels about certain things. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not mad at it. I definitely prefer that over, guys who lied to the media, make up stuff, just for the sake of playing the game or whatever. But yeah, I do think that there is such a cultural tension that you either have to say, okay, I'm going to back up the players. I'm going to keep the good players that we have, and I'm going to do what I can to make them happy and to support the culture that would benefit them. And we're going to find a new coordinator, or you're going to support the coordinator and risk alienating the locker room regardless of who's in there. Because now we're talking about multiple seasons in a row where, regardless of what Matt Eberflus has done in the past, how great of a coach, a defensive coach he may or may not have been, whether he was or was not a linebacker whisperer, now we're talking about consecutive seasons where we've got players in the current league, because we can't go back and play in the past, right? We can't go in a time machine for this, right? Currently, he's not resonating with players. That was the case with the Bears. That's been the case with the Cowboys. And so it's just like, do you want to continue this experiment when the trend is showing you he's not the guy? He's not the guy culturally. He's not the guy from a motivational standpoint. And he's not the guy from a scheme and coaching standpoint. It's like at some point you just gotta look how, like, the Cowboys are always talking about looking in the mirror. Okay, now that you've looked in the mirror, because y'all been talking about looking in the mirror all season, also look around. You can't just look in the mirror. You have to look around at who's standing next to you at the bathroom counter, so look in the mirror and then look to your left, look to your right, and look behind you. Look around. So anyway, that's it. Do I have any other sound bites? I'm trying to decide if I want to play the Kevontae Turpin soundbite or go straight into the FIFA stuff. Let's play the Kevontae Turpin soundbite. And it's not a soundbite from Turpin. This is a soundbite from the interview that I posted last night about the episode of Hard Knocks that is coming out today. So I conducted an interview yesterday with I was about to call him Mr. Rogers, with Ken Rogers of NFL Films. And we had a great conversation. You should definitely check out the whole interview. It's like 20 minutes long, so I'm not about to play the whole thing. But I am going to play this part where he talks about tonight and what to expect from tonight's episode of Hard Knocks.
And I think we really see this week what the Cowboys are all about. This week's episode really dives into Kevontae Turpin. And Turpin is sort of a perfect example of the type of character that exists outside of wins and losses. An underdog who helps bond the team together. The part of that glue that keeps people in brotherhood, in sync with each other, outside of whether they're in sync on a given play. That they, as a group, like each other, and Turpin is a big part of that. So I think our overall story is tracking the ups and downs that happen to any team, and in that scenario, no one's been better television than the Cowboys this year. They've been really up and really down.
They've been through a lot this season. Actually, going back to maybe this time last year, starting with the tumultuous coaching search and figuring out how to right the ship and everything since then. But hearing that this episode is going to focus on Turpin is interesting because I think a lot of the fans that I interact with are kind of down on Turpin. And if you were to ask them who's the glue that's holding the team together, they would not mention Cavante Turpin. But he has been through a lot of ups and downs, both on this team and in his real life. So essentially after that, he goes on to talk about, I asked him what fans get wrong about Cavante Turpin. And he didn't talk specifically about Turpin. He gave more of a general answer about the fact that fans tend to get players wrong a lot, and that fans don't have an accurate understanding of who any of these guys are. Just even with the exclusive access that he gets through NFL films for documentaries like Hard Knocks, he says even through that lens, you don't get an accurate representation of who these guys are. And so I thought that was really interesting. And we went from there to talk about, just how players are misunderstood, how their youth plays into how their stories are represented on the screen, so on and so forth. So it's a really great interview. He's one of those guys who, like, once we started talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, this could be a much longer interview. But a peek behind the curtain, when I arrange these things through these PR firms, what I don't like to do is take up an excessive amount of time beyond what I requested. I made that mistake very early on in my podcasting career, and so I don't do that anymore. So I only requested 20 minutes this time. But if y'all like interviews like that and y'all want me to interview more people who have like that kind of insider yet outsider peek into the Dallas Cowboys, let me know and I'll try to arrange something else. He said he'll come back on the show. And so like if I can get 30 minutes to an hour, I 100% will do that for you guys, especially if y'all keep sending me super chats so that I have time to work on stuff like that. But yeah, so tonight's episode of Hard Knocks will be available on HBO and available to stream on HBO Max at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. So check that out if you have a minute. Now, that said, as always, if y'all have other questions or comments about the Dallas Cowboys, feel free to throw those in the chat. But I'm going to move on to what's happening with the FIFA news. So essentially, what's been in the headlines lately is this issue with the ticket pricing. Now, in the past, when it comes to FIFA, and actually when we've talked about international sports, a couple of weeks ago, I told you guys that if you are a sports fan, one of the things that you have to come to terms with is the capitalistic nature of global sports, because every sport has a global element now. I told y'all that. And that's true. So that's one of the things that comes into play with the storyline. And when I say capitalistic, I know the word capitalism has a bad rap right now. I'm not saying it to be good or bad. I'm just saying it's the truth. And you need to understand that so that when certain things happen, you're not in denial about how things should play out or how you thought they would play out. It's like, no, this is all capitalism in the sense that there is some group of people who is aiming to make money off of what you're enjoying. And if it means cutting costs, if it means, like skirting around certain regulations, if it means breaking a few promises, they will. And in this case with FIFA, if it means like 400%, 500% increases in ticket prices compared to the last events, they will do that too. So I ended up catching an interesting debate from, I think it's a show that's based in France. I can't really tell, but I'm going to play a little bit of that for you guys so y'all have a little bit of an idea of the background on this. And while I'm pulling this up, I just want to say, sometimes when I post stuff like this, y'all don't really respond in the comments with y'all's thoughts. And I'll see that y'all are watching it, but I know it's a little bit harder to comment than it is on the Cowboy stuff. And so just know that even if you don't really have an opinion, I just need some feedback from y'all that y'all actually like this content. Because in the past, y'all have been like, yeah, nerd out with us. Like, it's fine. And y'all don't care if I nerd out. But now that we're going into the off season and I'm doing it every week, I just want to check back in. And so, like, if y'all are like, yeah, the content is good, just give me a thumbs up. Or if you're watching after the fact in the comments, just say, hey, keep it up with the global content. Or if you absolutely hate it, let me know that too. But anyway, here is the soundbite, or I should say the segment. It's part of the segment that they were running on this particular network.
Tickets range from $180 to $700 for group stage games, with entry to the final reaching over $8,600. Prices at most levels orders of magnitude higher than 2022's Cup in Qatar. Fan groups have called those levels extortionate, decrying a monumental betrayal of the tournament's traditions of cross-cultural inclusiveness. They point out that the new $60 tickets will make up just 1.6% of each stadium's seats, and that the next cheapest tier is 15 times as expensive.
It is a step into the right direction, but it's clearly not sufficient. The gap between two categories is enormous. So it is a good and a fair price for some, a few hundreds of fans, and then when you move on to the next step on the ladder, it's very, very expensive.
All right, so I'm going to go back to where it showed what those prices were. All right, so if you compare 2026 prices, $180 to $700 for the group stage and $4,185 to $8,680 for the final, to what it was just 4 years ago in Qatar. Group stage was $11 to $275, and the finals were $206 to $1,607. So that is a huge gap, and that is what FIFA fans are upset about. But if you listen to what the narrator was saying there, he's talking about just basically the rights of the fans, human rights, things that are considered in comparison to capitalism, they're considered kind of altruistic in a way, because the only reason that an organization would have to not charge as much as they possibly could is just simply out of consideration for the fans. And so that's why a lot of people are upset. They're like, you're not considering us here. And so there are some people who are like, well, will anybody show up? And I'm going to say, yes, they will. And before I get into why they will, I want to also address some of the other things that came up in this segment, because not only are the ticket prices an issue, but they're also talking about human rights issues when it comes to this particular World Cup. And why is that? A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the World Peace Prize and how that might have been basically an olive branch from FIFA to the Trump administration saying, hey, let's just get along for the sake of this event going well. Because as I said, typically when there are international sporting events that take place in countries where there's any sort of social or political tension, it doesn't bode well, especially when it comes to soccer. Because soccer fans, they're used to being able to exercise their political speech at games, as well as attend the games for fun, right? So when it comes to what's expected for people coming into the country, one, you have a travel ban on a lot of countries. Two, now there's this mandate saying that people have to show like 5 years of their social media history to come into the country. Then you've got this pricing issue, which seems to be trying to price out some of the poorer countries or just poorer people. And then you've got this potential of these FIFA games, these FIFA matches, basically turning into ice dragnets, right? Because you've got, for example, Haiti, who Trump has described as a shithole country. His words, not mine. There are some Haitians that are here because of legal possibilities that Trump is planning on revoking in February, right? And so let's say all those people don't leave the country immediately. Fast forward, World Cup takes place, and now those matches end up basically being a target to get people deported. Or better yet, like an even easier example, let's say you come here from a country that's not a shithole country, or maybe you had to jump through the hoops to get your visa, but you get the visa and you come over here. But then next thing you know, some members of your family who came to enjoy the games with you, y'all end up getting separated. Now y'all in separate vans in separate parts of the country, and you can't find each other. These are the things that people are afraid of when it comes to the World Cup being held in 11 different cities in the USA. And so getting back to how that relates to the ticket prices, basically the thing that those two things have in common is that there's just, it brings a level of unpredictability to the World Cup and to what people can expect and how they can expect to be treated. And so in this particular segment, there was a woman who was asked, do you think we should boycott the World Cup? And she said, that's not what we're asking for. We're basically asking for the World Cup to keep its promise in terms of human rights and consideration of the fans. Understandable. But here's why I don't think that will matter. Here's why I think people will show up anyway. And it's based on a pattern that we can see in the U.S. Because you've got people overseas saying, who's going to pay that? Who in the world can afford that? You know who can? Corporations. And America has seen it done before. If you look at an event like South by Southwest that's held a few hours down the road from where I am right now in Austin, Texas, and platinum passes to South by Southwest are about $8,000, $9,000 now. But they can charge that because essentially what happens is businesses, companies will pay for their workers to attend these events, and then it's a tax write-off for them because it's an employee benefit. And you might be thinking like, well, how would that work in the U.S.? Does the U.S. have enough soccer fans to fill the seats of the FIFA World Cup? And I will say, it doesn't matter, because for those lower tier prices, yes, there are people in the U.S. who will pay hundreds of dollars to go to a sporting event. That's pretty much normal at this point. For the higher level ones, this is where we get into a thing where even if there's not enough soccer fans, people will go for clout. If going to the FIFA World Cup ends up being a sign of status, you will have enough people to go and fill those seats just to say they did it. You're starting to see it in college sports with a lot of these college stadiums building these lush luxury VIP sections. You're seeing it a lot at events like the NFL playoffs and especially the Super Bowl. It's been a complaint probably for the last 3 years that fans who go to the Super Bowl aren't actually fans of the teams who are there. They're there because of media companies that they work for, who they know. Their companies sent them there. They've been gifted tickets by some company, some corporation. It's turned into a lot of business meetings at the Super Bowl as opposed to fans. They're genuinely cheering for their team or cheering for the sport. So do I think it's unfortunate that certain fan bases are being priced out? Yes. Do I think it's unfortunate that because of travel restrictions and because of the current political climate in this country, that there are people who might not feel safe coming to the U.S.? That is terrible to me, especially considering the fact that the USA was announced as a host for this event back in 2018. And just the climate, the anticipation of the event was very different at that time than what people are dealing with now. I think there are a lot of people who did not predict at all that they would be dealing with some of these issues now, because the reason why the World Cup wasn't held in countries like Russia, like China, was because people thought the U.S. would be more welcoming. People would feel more comfortable. And now that's turning out to not be the case, right? There are some people having these conversations. They're not even referring to the USA as a democratic nation, which is crazy. But what they're referring to is the fact that you have one person or a small group of people who can make decisions regarding this event, just like in a totalitarian nation. So from an operational perspective, the USA and the way this event is being handled is happening just like how it's happened in totalitarian nations based on the people who are covering the sport. And that is bananas. That is bananas. And so there's a lot more to get into when it comes to this. I'm reading JV's comments. He says, I'm not a huge fan of soccer, but I do appreciate the knowledge. It helps me converse when I'm out among strangers. Okay, well, based on that and the fact that the audience has not dropped significantly, I will keep bringing y'all the information. So we might cover this a little bit more later this week because there's a lot more to get into. Like I'm telling y'all, I'm gonna link to that full video. It's like a 45-minute video, but there's a dude on there. He's an old school journalist. His name is Craig Capitas, and he went in on this topic. And so he had a lot to say. Like, if y'all are interested in this topic, you need to watch that video. It's so good. And that guy, oof, I want to hear more from him 100%. But basically, there's a lot that could be fixed with the World Cup. There's a lot that might not be fixed. But what I'm saying is it's FIFA's responsibility to fix it based on the promises that they made about their commitment to human rights for this particular World Cup. But at the same time, nobody seems to have a plan for what they're going to do about it. A boycott won't work because, like I said, there are corporations, there are people in the top 1%, 5% who will still pay to go to these events. So I don't see a boycott being the solution here. I think if you are going to try to come up with some way to send the message that human rights violations and these very restrictive travel bans and political stances will not be tolerated, you're going to have to think in the future. Because you're either going to have to come up with something that can work now and for the long term, or you need to just cut your losses for this event and start focusing on, for example, the Olympics that will be in this country in just a couple years. Sounds like a long way away, but if you are actually planning to incite change, that's not that far from now. There are policies being implemented right now already that will impact what happens at the Olympics. So if this matters to you, yeah, you should already be thinking about that, you know? And so when it comes to the World Cup, I'm hoping that it'll still be a great event. I'm hoping that there are no tragedies. But one other thing that I want to mention is that while everybody's complaining about prices, and yes, the prices were lower in 2022 when it was hosted in Qatar, there were also some serious human rights violations that did not stop people from going to that World Cup. So as much as people are complaining about prices and about travel bans, what about the hundreds of workers that died building stadiums in Qatar because they were not building them under safe conditions and they weren't really even being paid a fair wage? So it's just like, y'all ain't saying nothing when hundreds of people died. Y'all talking about how the prices was lower. But fast forward, the event is held in the U.S. and y'all complaining about the high prices. So I'm just like, okay, so we need to pick, as fans, we need to accept the capitalistic nature of global sports. And with that being understood, we need to pick our battles. And if we're going to say that human rights issues are where we draw the line, that needs to be the line that you draw all the time. You can't go to the World Cup in 2022 where people literally died setting up that event and then be like, oh, that was a great World Cup and look how low the prices were, and then turn around and criticize the World Cup being held in the U.S. talking about the prices are too high. And just for anybody who's wondering, yes, FIFA still made money. They did not lose money. As a matter of fact, they ended up with a surplus of almost $3 billion after that event. So I don't even think it was a situation where they just had to have the cheapest workers to get that event off. They made more money than they'd ever made off that World Cup. You know what I'm saying? Royal says, hi, Jazz, I'm late. Sorry, kind of busy. Okay, well, we'll check in with you later this week. But anyway, Cowboys have a game on Thursday. We're going to revisit this topic later this week, so make sure you have your notifications turned on for the next time I go live. I know Thursday is Christmas Day, but I ain't going nowhere. So, like, yes, I'll probably be live streaming, and we can have some fun in that chat. And then next time we have some headlines to discuss, and I have something to share, I'll, go live, and y'all will get the notification. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. This has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports on NTX Radio. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and I'm out.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joco Community Radio.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one.